A scientist is digging through old storage boxes in a museum basement, dusty shelves, old jars, forgotten things. Then she finds it. A small, dry, dead-looking plant. No water, no sunlight, no soil, just sitting there in a sealed container. The label says it was collected in the early 1800s, over 200 years ago. She brings it to her lab. She gives it some water, some light, some soil, and then it grows. A plant that was dead for 2 centuries just came back to life. No, this is not science fiction. This is real. This actually happened. And today we're going to find out how. Stay with me. Because what scientists discovered about this plant changes everything we thought we knew about life, death, and survival. Let's go back to the beginning. Museums and herbariums, those are places that store pressed, dried plants, have been collecting plant samples for hundreds of years. Scientists collect plants from all over the world, dry them, press them flat, and store them carefully for future study. These plants are not meant to grow again. They are meant to be studied, measured, classified. That's it. But here's the thing. Some plants have a secret weapon. Some plants produce structures called spores, tiny, almost indestructible little cells. Not seeds exactly, but something even tougher. Spores are found in mosses, ferns, fungi, and some algae. They are designed by nature to survive the impossible. And when scientists started testing old herbarium samples, just curious to see what was still inside, they made a shocking discovery. Some of these spores were still alive. Not just a little alive, fully alive, ready to grow, waiting patiently inside dried plants that had been sitting in museum boxes since the time of Napoleon, since before the American Civil War, since before electricity existed. One of the most famous cases involves a type of moss, a simple, small, green plant that you've probably seen growing on rocks or old walls. Scientists took a moss sample that had been dried and stored for over 200 years, gave it the right conditions, and it started growing again. Just like that. The scientific world was stunned. Now, let's talk about the plant itself. Because to understand why this is so incredible, you need to understand what kind of plant we're talking about. The plant at the center of most of these discoveries is moss, specifically a type of moss from the bryophyte family. Moss is one of the oldest types of plants on Earth. It has been around for over 450 million years. Long before dinosaurs, long before flowers, long before trees. Moss was already here, and moss has survived every mass extinction, every ice age, every asteroid, every volcanic winter. Why? Because moss is not like other plants. Most plants need roots that go deep into soil. They need lots of water flowing through their system. They need to keep their internal chemistry active all the time. If they dry out, they die. Moss doesn't work that way. Moss can do something extraordinary. It can dry out completely, lose almost all the water in its cells, or just pause. It doesn't die. It enters a state that scientists call desiccation tolerance. It basically shuts down every process in its body. No breathing, no growing, no moving, just waiting. And then when water comes back, even after years, decades, or centuries, it wakes up again. Scientists have a name for this. They call it cryptobiosis, which comes from Greek words meaning hidden life. The life is still there. You just can't see it. It's hidden, waiting, frozen in time. Think of it like the plant pressing a pause button on life itself, and it can hold that pause for a very, very long time. Okay, but how? How does a living thing survive? Without water, without food, without air, for 200 years? This is where it gets really fascinating. When a moss plant starts to dry out and something amazing happens inside its cells, the plant starts producing special protective molecules. One of the most important ones is called trehalose, a type of sugar. Now, normally, when cells dry out, the proteins and other molecules inside them get damaged. They stick together, fold wrong, or break apart. That's what happens when most living things die from dehydration. But trehalose acts like a shield. It wraps around the important molecules in the cell. It protects them from damage. It essentially replaces the water that holds everything in place, keeping the cell's structure intact, even when no water is present. It's like nature's own bubble wrap, protecting the fragile contents of the cell during storage. But that's not all. Moss cells also repair themselves. When the water comes back, the plant doesn't just wake up. It immediately starts fixing any damage that occurred during the dry period. Scientists have discovered that mosses have incredibly efficient DNA repair systems. If any part of their genetic code gets damaged during the long wait, they can fix it. This is huge, because even with all the protection, 200 years is a long time. Cosmic rays, background radiation, and just the slow passage of time can damage DNA. The fact that this plant can fix those errors when it wakes up is extraordinary, and there's more. Mosses also slow down something called reactive oxygen species, basically harmful chemicals that can form inside cells and cause damage. Most living things constantly fight these chemicals. Moss, when dried out, produces special antioxidants that neutralize them during the long wait. So basically, moss has 3 lines of defense. First, it protects its cells before they dry out. Second, it neutralizes damage during the dry period. Third, it repairs whatever damage is left when it wakes up. It's like having a vault, a security system, and a repair crew all working together to protect life during the long sleep. Okay, so 200 years is already mind-blowing. But scientists started asking, is there a limit? How long can these plants actually survive? The answers are pushing the boundaries of what we thought possible. In 2014, a team of scientists from the British Antarctic Survey made headlines around the world. They were working in Antarctica, one of the coldest, harshest places on Earth. They were studying ancient frozen moss from lake sediment cores. These moss samples had been frozen under the ice for approximately 5,900 years. They brought them back to the lab. They warmed them up gently. They gave them water and light, and they grew. 1,500-year-old plants, growing again. The scientists published their results in the journal Current Biology. The study was reviewed, tested, confirmed. This was real. But even that wasn't the end of the story, because researchers have found evidence suggesting that some plant material, particularly spores from mosses and ferns, might survive for much, much longer. Some studies hint at spores surviving in permafrost for tens of thousands of years. And here's a truly jaw-dropping case from the animal world that helps put this in perspective. In 2021, scientists revived microscopic animals called nematodes, tiny worms, from Siberian permafrost. These animals had been frozen for approximately 46,000 years. 46,000 years. And they woke up, they started moving, they even reproduced. Now, those are animals, not plants, but the same basic principles apply, the same protective chemistry, the same pause and wait strategy. Life, it turns out, is far more stubborn than we ever imagined. The moss is special, but it's not alone. Nature has given this superpower to other living things too. And when you start looking, you start seeing it everywhere. Tardigrades. You've probably heard of these. They're tiny, 8-legged microscopic animals sometimes called water bears. They are possibly the most indestructible creatures on Earth. They can survive extreme cold, extreme heat, radiation, the vacuum of space, and, yes, complete desiccation. They use the same trehalose trick. They've been found alive in 100-year-old dried moss samples in museum collections. Brine shrimp eggs. If you've ever had a sea monkey kid as a kid, you've held cryptobiosis in your hands. Those little eggs can sit dry on a shelf for years and then hatch when you add water. Amazing. Lotus seeds. In China, scientists germinated a lotus seed that was over 1,300 years old. It grew into a beautiful flowering plant. The seeds had been preserved in the dry bed of an ancient lake. Bacteria. Scientists have found bacteria in salt crystals that are 250 million years old, from the time before dinosaurs. Some researchers claim they successfully revived these bacteria. Though this claim is still debated, the fact that it's even possible to debate it tells you something. Yeast. Brewers and bakers have revived yeast strains from old bottles of wine and ancient honey. Some of these yeast strains are hundreds of years old and were used to brew real, drinkable beer. The pattern is clear. Life has a deep, ancient toolkit for survival. And cryptobiosis, this strategy of pausing life and waiting, is one of the most powerful tools in that kit. It has evolved independently in different creatures across millions of years. That tells you something important. This works. This is one of nature's most tested, most proven survival strategies. Now here's where things get really interesting. Because this isn't just a cool nature fact. This discovery has enormous implications for science, medicine, space exploration, and maybe even the future of humanity, medicine and organ preservation. Right now, one of the biggest problems in medicine is keeping organs alive for transplant. A donated heart can only survive for about 4 to 6 hours outside the body. A kidney, maybe 36 hours. Every year, people die waiting for transplants because organs can't be transported far enough or fast enough. But what if we could put organs into a state like cryptobiosis? What if we could pause them, protect their cells the same way moss protects its cells, and then wake them up hours, days, or weeks later? Scientists are already working on this. They're studying trehalose and other protective molecules, trying to apply them to human cells and organs. Early experiments have been promising. Blood and tissue banking. Similar principles could transform how we store blood, platelets, and other biological materials. Currently, blood has a short shelf life. Platelets last only about 5-7 days, but with cryptobiosis-inspired techniques, we might be able to store these things for much longer without refrigeration. This could be transformative in disaster zones, remote areas, or military field hospitals where cold storage isn't available. Space travel. This one is enormous. If humans are ever going to travel to other star systems, journeys that would take thousands of years at any speed we can currently imagine, we'd have a serious problem. Humans don't live that long. We can't survive 10,000 years of space travel while awake. But what if we could put people into a state of suspended animation, a deep sleep, like cryptobiosis, where the body is preserved and protected until it's time to wake up? Scientists are studying cryptobiosis in animals and plants specifically because they believe the secrets locked in these organisms could help us develop real suspended animation technology. And on a smaller scale, for journeys to Mars, maybe 6 to 9 months of travel, putting astronauts into a medically induced hibernation could reduce resource needs, reduce radiation exposure, and reduce the psychological burden of the long journey, preserving endangered species. If we can understand how spores and seeds survive for centuries, we can build much better seed banks and genetic archives. We already have the Svalbard Global Seed Vault in Norway, which stores seeds from thousands of plant species as a backup against extinction. But with better cryptobiosis science, we could store genetic material from endangered animals and plants even more reliably. We could potentially rebuild ecosystems that have been destroyed, even centuries later. Understanding life on other planets. Here's the philosophical big one. If life on Earth can survive for hundreds or thousands of years in a dormant state, then life elsewhere in the universe might too. Think about it. If a meteorite hit a planet that had simple moss-like organisms on it, some of those organisms, trapped in rocks, could theoretically survive the journey through space, dormant, protected, waiting. Then, if that rock landed on another planet with the right conditions, that life could potentially wake up and start growing. This idea is called panspermia, the theory that life can travel between planets and even between star systems. The fact that cryptobiosis is real and that it works over centuries makes panspermia far more plausible than it once seemed. Life might not just be tough. Life might be a traveler. This is an active, exciting field of research. Scientists around the world are racing to unlock these secrets. At universities and research institutes, teams are studying the genes of mosses and tardigrades in incredible detail. They want to know exactly which genes turn on when these organisms start drying out, which proteins get produced, how the repair systems work. One breakthrough came when scientists sequenced the full genome of a tardigrade and found something shocking. About 17% of the tardigrade's genome didn't come from its own ancestors. It came from bacteria, fungi, and plants. This is called horizontal gene transfer. And it means tardigrades literally absorbed survival genes from other organisms over millions of years of evolution. They borrowed the best tools from bacteria and plants to build their own super survival system. Researchers are now asking, could we use genetic engineering to give human cells some of these same abilities? Could we make human cells more resistant to dehydration, radiation, or extreme cold? It sounds like science fiction, but every piece of the puzzle is a real documented biological mechanism. Scientists just need to figure out how to apply them. Meanwhile, botanists and ecologists are continuing to study herbarium samples and ancient ice cores. Every old museum collection is now being looked at with new eyes. What seemed like dead history might actually be living history, waiting for the right conditions. I want to take a moment and step back, because this story isn't just about moss or science. It's about something deeper. We live in a world that moves very fast, where things are born, grow, get old, and die, where time feels like a one-way street, where if you miss your moment, it's gone forever. But this plant, this tiny, humble moss, tells a different story. It says, I am in no hurry. I will wait. 200 years? That's fine. 500 years? No problem. I'll be here when conditions are right. I trust that my time will come. There's something almost spiritual about that. And there's something humbling about it, too. We humans, with all our technology, all our intelligence, all our complexity, we can barely survive a few days without food or water. We fall apart quickly. We're fragile. But this ancient, simple plant has been doing something we can't do, surviving the impossible, waiting across centuries, preserving something precious, life itself, until the moment is right. Nature, once again, turns out to be smarter than us, and that's not a reason to feel small. It's a reason to pay attention, to study, to learn, because everything we need to solve our greatest challenges, from medicine to space travel, might already exist in the natural world, waiting to be discovered. Just like that moss, waiting. Ready? Alive. Closing. 31:30. So let me bring it all together. Scientists found plants that had been dried and stored in museum collections for over 200 years. When they gave those plants water and light, they grew again. This works because of cryptobiosis, a biological strategy where life completely pauses itself to survive impossible conditions. Mosses and other organisms use special protective molecules, antioxidants, and DNA repair systems to wait out centuries, and then wake up when conditions improve. This isn't just a curiosity. This discovery is already influencing research in organ preservation, medicine, space travel, seed banking, and the search for life on other planets, and it teaches us something beautiful about life itself. It is more resilient, more creative, and more patient than we ever imagined. The universe buries things. Life finds a way to come back. If this video blew your mind even a little bit, smash that like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Subscribe if you're new here, because we go deep on science stories just like this one every single week. Drop a comment below. What would you do if you could pause time for 200 years and wake up later? I want to know, and I'll see you in the next one.